So let's talk about actually implementing and displaying that authentication on the page. So what we're going to use is we're going to use this HTTP core service from Angular. That's one thing that's already bundled with Angular. And what it's going to do is it's going to return a promise with success and error callbacks whenever you're making an HTTP or AJAX request. And you make it in this format. It's pretty straightforward. You say, hey, HTTP get some endpoint for me, and do whatever's in the success callback if that call is successful. And we can do get. You set the header, you post, put, and delete.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it had some type of method.
Yeah, I think it sets the header.
Yeah.
So we'll also need to save our authentication status. Now, I touched on root scope before, but root scope basically is a scope that's available to the entire module. And it's not great to use globals, but we're just going to use that for now to basically save our authentication. And once a user is logged in, we have access to their username, and we can display that, we show that anywhere, and we can save their authentication status for the duration of the time that they're in that
So it's
app.
very convenient because it's useful anywhere, so we don't necessarily, any view that we have, we can see that we have authenticated information, right?
Yeah, and we're also going to start logging out our users, as well as we're going to start showing and hiding elements based on authentication. So for example, we can make it so that only authenticated users can post, or authenticated users can see the the log out button, but unauthenticated users will be able to see the register and login button. That way, we're actually showing the elements as they're needed for the user.
Nice.
And finally, we're going to redirect the user. So we're going to check the authentication status as we're making that request. And we're going to use yet another Angular service, location, to change the URL that the user is on and redirect the user to another page as it's needed. So for example, once someone has logged in, we can redirect them to the main view and have them see the feed and potentially post something, and same for register. So with that, let's actually go through and implement our authentication. We're going to go in here in this authentication thing here, and we're actually going to start by putting in the dependencies that we're going to need. So as I said before, we're going to need root scope, and we're also going to need location. And now I'm going to go up and actually create that root scope. So I believe what I do is I do run. Actually, you know what? I don't want to do this wrong. Let me make sure.
Yeah, that's not.
Authentication. And that is going to be in Module 5.
Yeah, so we're continuing now. We're actually on the README. It's the Module 5 section.
Yeah. Okay, so I was close. I was doing it right.
Right.
You do run, and then you run a function, and then you say root scope here, because we're going to actually need to declare the root scope here, so we'd start making changes to it. And we're going to do. So great, and this is where we're going to put in our changes to the root scope. So much as we did for declaring the scope variables here, we're going to do the same thing and basically declare some root scope variables. So we're going to say root scope. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to set an authenticated Boolean to basically say, hey, is the user on the site right now authenticated? We're going to default that to false, of course. Change this to root scope. And we're also going to save that authenticated user's username. And we're going to call that current user and leave that blank for now. And so now, when we're actually logging in, we can set those root scope variables. I forgot one more thing. We have a lot of dependencies here. We're actually going to use HTTP as well, because we're going to be calling those HTTP authentication endpoints. I'm going to clear this placeholder data for now and say, when we're logging in, we want to make a post, and we want to make that to auth login. And we're going to actually post our, what is it called? our user that's from the login page. So the user model here that we've created and is accessible here, we're actually going to just pass that root scope user to the login function. And we're just going to only worry about the success callback for now.
What can go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, this is a carefully choreographed demo, right? So probably not too much. OK, so now that we've passed the scope user to the auth/login endpoint, we're in the success handler. So this is what will go into if that authentication is actually successful. And so if the authentication is successful, like I said, we want to do a couple of things. First of all, we want to set our root scope dot current user dot authenticated to true because we just authenticated a user. We also want to set our root scope current user to be the current user's username. I'm just having a lot of trouble typing, but these are all correct things. So you'll see that we got the data back from in this callback. So I'm just going to access the user variable. And
so this is the same user object that's sitting in the MongoDB database, right?
Yeah, and that's what Steven's passing back to me in that API, and that's what I'm getting here in basically the response. So I'm getting the data, that username, and I'm also going to set the location. So redirecting the user basically to our root if this is correct. So we can do that by using location path. So, and this will just change the path in URL, and therefore, of course, also change our view. So I think this is right for login, and we're going to do the same for register. At the end of the day, these are pretty similar commands, except that one is actually registering a user, and one is logging one in. So we can do essentially the same thing. Because after a user has successfully registered, they're automatically going to be authenticated, and they're going to be logged in. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run it here. I'm going to just register a new account for myself. Hopefully this works. No errors.
Try it. Is it? OK.
Nope, 404.
Oh,
you know what? I don't think the path is register. I think it's sign up.
No, it's not registered. It's sign up. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even catch that.
So let's try again with the right path. OK, awesome. And now I'm signed in. However, this is not really what we want. So now that we actually have users being able to sign in, we should actually display that sign in somewhere. So let's actually display a signed-in user up here and start hiding these login and register links. We'll also probably want to make a logout function.
OK, so if I'm signed in, I shouldn't, depending on whether I'm signed in or not, it'll show me.
Yeah, exactly. And so first, actually, let me go make that logout function, because if you can log in, you should be able to log out.
Yep.
So similar to the way that the logout function was in that request, or is stored in the request, we're going to actually store our logout function in the root scope so that it can also be accessed from anywhere. So we're actually going to create a root scope function here. We're going to call this logout. I always have a lot of anxiety over whether I should call things logout or sign out, which I understand is not a real problem. It's just one that I'm always grappling with. Super
tough problem, Holland.
But basically, all we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, we're going to deauthenticate the user from Angular, but we also need to call that actual
so yeah, the bottom
HTTP
two
endpoint
are locally signing you out, but not actually.
Yeah, exactly. And before I forget, we'll actually also need the HTTP dependency here since we're using it. So we're going to use HTTP, and I believe it is a post.
It's a post. No, it's a get. Sorry. It is a get.
You said that, but I started typing in get. I feel like.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a get.
Okay.
I'll double check for you. I'm pretty sure.
Auth, and it's auth.logout?
Sign out.
Sign out. See, these things are difficult. We need to just ban one of those terms from the world, and then no one will get confused anymore. So I'm not going to actually use a callback for that because I'm just going to assume that works. It is a lazy way to do it.
Wrong?
I'm sorry, but let's just leave that for now and start running that. Oh, we don't actually have a way to call this logout function. We should call these logout, login functions from actually our navigation, right? Because we want to be able to do those actions from anywhere. And so for that, we're actually going to edit them in index. So first of all, I am going to do what I always do when it's the HTML part. I am going to copy it in.
Yeah, nobody wants to type that.
Plus, getting HTML perfect and beautiful is just,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't call it not fun because I love front-end stuff, but it's not.
You usually write in Jade, don't you, right?
Oh, yeah. Actually, Jade is the other templating engine that you can use with Express. We use EJS today just because it's really, I mean, you haven't really seen it in action yet, but EJS is really, really great for...
It's like embedded JavaScript,
Yeah.
embedded C#, embedded Ruby. It's the same idea. It's just JavaScript that's embedded into HTML, which is kind of silly to think about because on the front end you do have that too.
Yeah.
But it's just Jade is a nicer way to write HTML.
Yeah. But the syntax is significantly different enough that we didn't want to throw another new thing at you when we were already doing 4 technologies.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm actually going to save this. What I did here is I have some one thing here, which is the ng-click element, and it shows logout. So ng-click is basically whenever you click this element, you're going to run this Angular function, and we're also using basically the current user here, and we're just displaying the current user in the sign-in if one exists. So one other thing that I wanted to show is actually these ng-show directives that we're using. So this ng-show directive basically says, hey, if the user is authenticated, so if authenticator is true, then show this element. If it's false, then don't show this element.
So ng-show takes a true or false.
Yeah, it takes a true or false. And there's actually another nifty sibling of it, I guess you could say, which is ng-hide. And we can use that ng-hide on our login and register links. So ng-hide will basically hide the element if the Boolean that's passed to it
So
is
it's
true.
inverse, really.
Yeah, exactly. So with this, when we log in, it's not showing up. Did I save? First of all, did I save this?
This is the right file.
Oh, you know what I didn't do?
This is in the completed.
This is in the completed. I'm going to copy. I keep putting things in the wrong folder, and
yeah.
I'm really, really
So
sorry.
usually when I do it, I open up the particular directory in Sublime so I don't confuse it like that. Because you open up the whole repository. That's probably why.
I did open up the whole repository, but you saw what I did.
Yeah, we all saw it.
And
We believe it.
let's actually...
All right, there we go. And log in.
Right, and now you'll see up here, we say signed in as Helen1. That's the username that you all just saw me use. And it shows the logout as well, because these show if the user is authenticated. OK, awesome. One piece you'll see that we're still missing, though, is the actual feed that we want to show. And so that's the piece that we'll do next.